Christopher Chantrey, thank you for being a guest on Paris Live for Radio France International.
My pleasure.
I'd like to begin with your organisation that you're a vice president of. It's the British Community Committee of France.
That's right.
And I'd like to know what this organisation does and what you do personally.
Right. Well, the British Community Committee of France was set up actually in 1937, so it's been around for a long time, and it represents the British who live in France through the local associations to which they belong or from which they benefit. And we have a book which we call the Official Directory of Member Organisations, so that people who want to practice a particular activity, it could be table tennis, it could be amateur dramatics, and they can find other people in other parts of France, other British people, to do those things with them. But also we make representations at times of crisis, at times of need, and of course Brexit is one of those occasions.
And what is your role? Are you a coordinator of these groups?
Yeah, British in France, the organisation exists to coordinate them, publicise their activities, publicise their existence. But of course now with Brexit we have all this other work as well, speaking to our government in the UK, speaking to the European institutions, and I haven't mentioned British in Europe, but I imagine you're coming on to British in Europe, which is an organisation that sprang up following the result of the referendum, so much younger than the British Community Committee of France. But British in Europe sprang up to defend the interests of British people living in the EU27, whose rights, of course, were at great risk as a result of the referendum.
Indeed, there's a term that we can see British in Europe using, which is the term ring-fencing.
Yes.
To do with British rights or even European rights in general. Can you explain a little bit this term?
Yes, ring-fencing is, the idea of ring-fencing is take the withdrawal agreement, which has been agreed by all the EU27 countries and the UK government, but hasn't been ratified by the UK Parliament. And at the moment, it looks as if it may never be ratified. There's going to be a fourth attempt by the British Prime Minister to get the deal through Parliament. And my latest information is that she's going to try again on the 6th of June in the form of a European Union withdrawal bill. So it's got to be different from the previous attempts. Otherwise, she won't be allowed by the Speaker, the President of the House of Commons. She wouldn't even be allowed to bring it in again. So she's going to try again. But there's a great risk that it won't pass. And the idea of ring fencing is, look, take what is for us, for citizens, British citizens living in other member states, what is for us the most important part, and put a fence round it and pass that, if that's the only thing that can be passed into law under Article 50 of the European Union treaties, if that's the only thing, let's save that. And that would then be the only formal agreement under Article 50, but that would safeguard our rights.
And that means rights of movement, being able to stay indefinitely.
It's being able to live where we live currently, being able to continue to work where we work currently, and to maintain all the social security coordination rights, such as your health. If you're retired, only about a fifth of the British citizens living in EU27 countries, only about a fifth of them are retired. But if they worked all their life in the UK and paid into the social security system in the UK, then the UK is called the competent state in Eurospeak, and it is the UK that pays their healthcare cover in the country where they live. So somebody living in France, we've got lots of pensioners living in France, they would have the carte vitale, which is the thing which gives you access to healthcare in France, but the cost of treatment would ultimately be paid by the NHS, which is the health service, National Health Service in the UK. And that's a very important thing. That's existed since 2004, a very important agreement of all the EU countries plus the EEA countries, so Norway and Iceland and Liechtenstein, and to lose that would be a terrible thing.
And indeed, this whole Brexit affair has probably shaken people's nerves to a certain extent, because I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about how your members have been reacting. Have they been suddenly going and doing administrative procedures that they wouldn't have normally done? And even in the uncertainty, how are they preparing for the future?
The uncertainty causes enormous stress and anguish. Just not knowing what to do or how you can plan for your future. This is true for all ages and all the places where UK nationals live in the EU 27 countries. But France, of course, has a large number. We think there are between 150,000 and 200,000 UK nationals living in France, and it's in most parts of France. So there is great stress caused by the uncertainty, and until relatively recently, we didn't know how we would be treated by France. Now, we do know now, because France issued in February an ordonnance, so an executive order, explaining what would happen in the event of no deal, in the event that the withdrawal agreement does not pass. And then that was added to by a decree which was published. It's dated the 2nd of April. Now, that lays out how we will be treated. It is, of course, much less favourable to us than our current status as European citizens. So people feel very strongly about the loss of European citizenship and the added bureaucracy. We're going to have to go through procedures to get a residence permit, pay money. People who are on temporary contracts, if there is no deal, will have to get a new card every year. The card will only be valid 1 year. It's going to cost €119. Family members will all have to have it. So it's something which is causing great concern to many, many people.
And with the EU elections on the horizon, how are people reacting to that? Are there people who feel that this could be an opportunity to bring Brexit back on the table and maybe not reverse it, but certainly fight back against it?
Well, Brexit is going to be obviously the key subject for this election. It's actually in the UK, the election is in a week's time. Many of us, however, are unable to vote in the UK because there is a UK law which prohibits your registering as a voter if you've lived outside the country for more than 15 years. And quite a lot of us, we don't know how many, but it might be half, we think 1.2 million UK nationals living in the EU 27 countries. It could well be half, it may be more than half of that number, who are prevented from voting in any election. So we were prevented from voting in the referendum. We are unable to vote in the UK if we're affected by that 15-year rule. That 15-year rule in the UK, we are prevented from voting in the UK. Now, we can vote in the country where we live because we're still European citizens. It didn't look possible when the departure date was set to be the 29th of March, but now the departure date has been put back to the 31st of October. So it could happen that people can now vote in the country residence. And I think they are motivated to do that, to try and make a difference. But the place where the vote will make more difference to us for our cause is voting in the UK.
And that's where a lot of, as you've explained, a lot of these votes, people have missed out on voting.
Yes, indeed, yes, because of the 15-year rule.
Yes, yes. You yourself, you're a British citizen,
yes.
But I believe you're also a French citizen?
No, I haven't yet. I didn't early. At the beginning, I didn't want to apply for French citizenship. I thought that as a UK national under the EU, if you live in another member state, you didn't need to do that. And my initial position was, no, I don't want to do this. I was appearing before a select committee in the House of Commons in January 2017, and I said I would not. apply for French citizenship. I have now decided that I should. It's now a question of time. I've got to get the file and the documents all together, which I will do.
And that's come out of this concern for the changing rules and
yes, because if you obtain the nationality of your state of residence, then the loss of rights is less. It reduces the loss of rights. Some rights, of course, flow from your place of work and where you pay your social security contributions and your pension contributions. In my case, I've worked pretty much all my professional life in France, so I maintain those rights, but of course to exercise those rights I still have to be allowed to continue to live here. And if there's no deal, then I have to go through a certain number of procedures to make sure that I can continue to live here. But France has been relatively generous in the ordonnance and the decree. We are treated slightly better than other third country nationals. The legislation says that if you are if you're a third country national, i.e. not an EU member state national, you have to have a visa before you come into France. Well, they didn't want, obviously, to have 200,000 people suddenly leaving to go to a French consulate in London or Brussels or somewhere close to get a visa. But we've been in discussion. One of the organisations that we talk to on a regular basis is the Carte de Séjour department of the Ministry of the Interior. I think some of the provisions which have come out in the decree are as a result of those conversations that we've been having.
And the British Community Committee represents roughly how many members?
It's difficult to say because we don't ask our member. We've about 105 member organisations of different sizes, of course. But if you take, for example, the British School in Paris, I mean that's going to be something like 500 pupils. I don't know the exact figure, plus the staff members, plus the parents. I mean that's quite a large population represented. There are other organisations of different sizes. So I can't give you a figure for the whole number. But the key thing is, I think the work we're doing on their behalf, by talking to the Ministry of the Interior, by talking to the institutions, the European institutions in Brussels, and talking to the UK government.
Well, thank you very much, Christopher Chantrey, for being my guest on Paris Live.
Thank you very much for inviting me.